Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Mike Massimino. Mike is a former NASA astronaut, a New York Times best-selling author, and a professor of mechanical engineering at Columbia University. He is a veteran of two space flights, the fourth and fifth Hubble Space Telescope servicing missions in 2002 and 2009. He has a team record for the number of hours spacewalking in a single space shuttle mission, and he was also the first person to tweet from space. During his NASA career, he received two NASA Space Flight Medals, the NASA Distinguished Service Medal, the American Astronautical Society's Flight Achievement Award, and the Star of Italian Solidarity. His two books, Spaceman, An Astronaut's Unlikely Journey to Unlock the Secrets of the Universe, and Moonshot, a NASA Astronaut's Guide to Achieving the Impossible, or New York Times bestsellers. A couple of fun facts. The street that Mike grew up on in Franklin Square, Long Island, was renamed Mike Massimino Street, and he played himself multiple times in the role of Howard's fellow on the Big Bang Theory television series. Mike, welcome to the Future Space.
Oh, Daniel, thanks for having me, and thanks for that very kind introduction. It's great to be here with you.
Well, it's your resume, it's not mine, so I just took your bio. Before we get into obviously your journey as an astronaut, the fact that you have a fear of heights, I can't believe that. Could you share with us three words that for you captures the essence of space?
Beautiful, exploration, and stressful. How about that one? For me, it was a combination of all those things, I think.
Now, if I believe your love for space really awakened when you saw Armstrong landing on the moon, and you share with the public through your books that you had a fear of heights and it was not a natural path for you. So was there like really no space desire before seeing Neil Armstrong, and then it really kicked you into a path, or how did that go?
Well, yeah, it really wasn't much of anything because I was only 6 years old when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. So my earliest memories of things, besides my family and my home, which was very nice, by the way. I had good parents. And you're growing up, you don't always realize that, I think. But looking back on it, I was very lucky with the mom and dad I had, and where I got to grow up. And I don't remember too. I think it was like the first major thing I remember. I remember there was a presidential election in 1968, and people talking about that. So I was 5 or 6 when that was going on, and then I remember the Apollo missions. So it was right at a time where I started to realize, or at least pay attention or understand that there were things going on outside of my house, outside of my little world that were happening. And so those major events, like the moon landing and what were there. And so there really wasn't much else going on. It was baseball, and it was, I think, the Peanuts cartoon strip. This is what that I remember. These things happened. The New York Mets, my baseball team, won the World Series in 1969, October. They landed a few months earlier on the moon. And then in that December, I went to see a boy named Charlie Brown at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. So I think those three things kind of stayed with me as a little guy and still are some of my favorite things now. But yeah, that was it. It really caught my attention. But it was interesting, Daniel, because I think everyone at that time was interested in the space program. It was a huge accomplishment, a huge news story for the whole world when Neil Armstrong took those first steps on the moon and the voyages before that getting ready. But for me, it meant something different, I could tell, compared to the other kids. So that was the thing that got me going. I didn't do much about it, really. And after about a year or so, as you said, I was afraid of heights. And I never saw myself growing up to be a fearless test pilot like my hero, Neil Armstrong. So I forgot about it until I was in college. And when I always had an interest, but I never had any intention of pursuing it until my senior year in college. I went to the movies and saw The Right Stuff based on the book by Tom Wolfe, and I saw the movie and read the book. It's about the original 7 astronauts and the test pilots that came before them. And it started to spur my interest again, and I started looking into what was going on in the space program at that time, and it had changed a lot. There was a lot of engineers and scientists now involved in the shuttle program, and I thought, well, I never expected to get selected, but at least I thought I could try. And that was the second thing. So it was seeing Neil Armstrong on the moon, and then going to the movies to see The Right Stuff. Those were the two major things that happened in my life to build my dream.
And you got rejected 3 times when you applied to NASA. Is the rejection almost kind of part of the process? Like it is expected to be rejected, and then it's just kind of an ask for you to kind of address certain issues so that you can ask again? Or when you get rejected, you really have to reassess if this is for you or not?
I think with the astronaut program, as I think with a lot of things, where you have a lot of people wanting to do something and only a few people are going to get that opportunity. There's a lot of great people that never get a shot. And I think that is the reality of it, that I knew going in, that thousands of people, back then it was probably about 7,000 or 8,000 people applying to the NASA, to the American program, and they were going to pick a handful. Sometimes they picked around 12. In my class that they ended up picking was one of the largest groups ever. There was 35 Americans in that group, plus 9 international astronauts. So, but I knew it really, there's no shame in being rejected from the astronaut office, from NASA, from the NASA astronaut program. As like anything else that requires an application and an evaluation, you can't control that. You put your best foot forward, but other people are going to be evaluating, and there's all kinds of factors that come into that. And they, as in most things, when people are picking a high-performing team or a class to go to college or whatever it might be, they do their best effort to try to make the right decisions. And it's not an easy. I've been on both ends of it, both applying and then on the other end selecting people. And after you get in, so I don't think there's any shame in getting rejected from something like that, where there's so many well-qualified people. When I finally got selected, I updated my application and was applying for about 10 years. There were 3 rejections, including a medical disqualification that I had to overcome, and then I got in on my 4th try. The fourth class that they were selecting that I applied to, I got in, and I remember showing up with my other classmates. Very first day of work, we were all dressed up in a suit and tie, and because we were going to have a press conference, and then we were going to get into our training the next day. But the first day was kind of like a press conference, get to know each other day. And Bob Cabana, who was our chief of the astronaut office, a Marine Corps pilot, had flown commander of the space shuttle, and ended up becoming the head of the director of the Kennedy Space Center and the number 2 person at NASA headquarters not that long ago. But I think recently retired. But anyway, Bob's a great guy, great astronaut, wonderful friend, wonderful, just an all-around good guy. And he greeted us as the chief of the astronaut office, and he said, we're very happy to have all of you. We're standing all dressed up, in this conference room. And we're all standing, but I don't know why. There wasn't enough seats, but I remember we all were standing, and he comes in to address us, and he says, we're all very happy to have you here. I want to welcome you to the astronaut office, but I want to remind you that for every one of you, there are thousands of people who would trade places with you in an instant this morning. And the only difference between you and them is that you are more fortunate than they are, and that you owe it to them and you owe it to the country for this opportunity you've been given to do the very best you can with this opportunity. And don't take it light, and all the hard work that took you to get here is going to be needed to make you successful. And I remember that. I think that was a really good way to sum it up. They were happy to have us. We had all earned our way there, but there was a lot of other people just as qualified as we were, just as deserving, who weren't there that morning and wish they were.
It makes me wonder if actually the rejection is by default a part of the selection process, like back in the insurance days, where like they would by default say no to any request just to see who who pursues and continue, because just by the rejection, usually you have a vast filter of it.
That's also a parenting technique, Daniel. You know, my kids are all
There we
grown,
go.
so I can say it now. But you just say, "Hey, can I do this?" No.
No. And so,
And because I feel sometimes maybe they want me to say no. Maybe they really don't want to go to this guy's house, and they want to blame it on me. So unless they come back, no, you can't do that. And then that's a parenting technique. But anyway, go ahead. What were you saying?
no,
That's a way to
absolutely.
build character or something, or-
exactly. It's
Yeah.
a way, because obviously you're training for something that demands the commitment to find a solution. So for someone who just basically gives up on the first, rejection, then obviously it gives you kind of a window into how they will address the impossible in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that it shows that you're dedicated and you're not
Yeah.
going to give up. They do, however, pick people on their first try.
Yeah. Oh, they do.
My crewmate Megan, and when they're young, my crewmate Megan MacArthur was picked on her very first try. She was still in her 20s. I think she was like 27 years old or something like that. She was very young. Didn't even finish her PhD at the time, and she came to NASA and finished her PhD remotely. But they really wanted her. But if you've ever met Megan MacArthur, you know why. I mean, you don't. Yeah, we'll take you right now. We don't want anything to happen where yeah, we want you. But I think for the other 99% of us on the planet, things just generally don't work out the first time. And I think it is. I've met plenty of people along the way that tried and got turned down and said, to heck with it. And I was like, well, that's not a very good attitude. It's something you really got to want to stick with. But I've heard that over and over again from people who. Sometimes they blame it on something else. Oh, I didn't know I could apply again once I was. I'm going, where'd you get that idea? You hear all these things. Oh, I don't know. So I think it's good actually that it's not an easy road, and most people do have to try it several times before they'll finally get picked. And I got in on my fourth selection, my fourth try. But others, it took a lot longer, and I was on the younger side, believe it or not, when I showed up. I was 33, almost 34, and there were a lot of my classmates that were older. I was on the younger side of that. So even though it seemed like a real slog, getting there, it really wasn't that bad in comparison to some of the other folks.
Just before we get to the second question, I'm kind of curious. First of all, do you still have a fear of heights, or?
Yeah, I don't like them.
You don't like them?
Yeah, I don't. I just, I don't like. I've talked about it with some of my. I'm not the only astronaut that's afraid of heights, and some pilots are too. It's not that I'm fine in an airplane or spacewalking or in space or a zip line. Certain things I'm kind of okay with. I don't like looking over the side of a building. I don't like doing things at height. Working at height. I was watching some window washers. Where was I? I don't know where I was, somewhere in the city or something, looking up, and some guys were. I'm like, there's no way you couldn't pay me enough money to do that. I don't know what those guys are getting paid, but I would never do that. I wouldn't jump out of the airplane. My wife had a significant birthday a couple of years ago, and her bucket list item was to jump out of an airplane. And she said, wouldn't it be great if we would do that together? And I said, that would be great, but I'm not doing it. I mean, unless the airplane's on fire, and I'm really sure that it's not gonna end well. Then I'll take my chances with the parachute. But no reason if the airplane's working to jump out of it. And she went and did it, with an instructor, but I did not participate. I took photos. So I don't like a lot of that stuff. And it was something I had to get comfortable with because, there was some adventurous things we had to do. But NASA was really good at helping us get comfortable with some of the things that we might not be accustomed to, let's put it that way. And so I was able to get through everything without too much issue.
It reminds me I didn't know that, but back in the age of exploration, where most of the exploration was done over, through the ocean, most of the sailors did not know how to swim. It was not a requirement for them to know how to swim. And you're like, wow, you're spending so much time on the on the ocean. Mike,
yeah, that's kind of interesting.
You're an engineer. You've been to space, and you've been able to experience something bigger than you. The overview effect, or just finding yourself into these places where you're forced to be humble. We often talk about the different kind of stories when it comes to space. There's the technology, there's the science, there's the diplomacy, the geopolitics. But what would be for you the human story of going to space?
Um, I think for me it was a dream come true, and it was extraordinary. And it wasn't just the time in space. For me as a NASA astronaut, when I wanted to become an astronaut, I didn't just want to fly in space. I knew that was part of it, but just as much, I wanted to be a part of the NASA team. I wanted to be part of not even just the NASA team, but the astronaut office team. I wanted to be one of those people that had that job. And the job is more than just flying in space. It was solving problems. And as you mentioned, I was an engineer. I am an engineer. And it was solving some tough engineering problems. And we were firsthand at that. We had access to be able to influence decisions and how we would do things. And it was a wonderful job on the ground in the training and the flying in jets that we did, and the aviation we got to do, and all the other instruction that we went through, and the camaraderie we built was extraordinary. So for me, I think it was being part of that team and working in the control center. I worked many hours in the control center during missions as a Capcom, and working with our instructor team as well, and had to solve problems and how to get people trained, and of course getting myself trained along with my crewmates. So for me, it was the experience was really special because I got to do it full time and as part of the astronaut office, where that was my job, and that every day I got to do something to contribute to the human spaceflight program, not just if I was flying, but also to help others go. So that, I think, was very gratifying for me. I really enjoyed the job part of it. In addition to the flying in space, I think we think about, how flying in space, how cool that is, and it certainly is. But I really enjoy all aspects of the job, most of the time. Not every day, but most of the days.
Do you think that as a species we have kind of forgotten what we're great at? That we're too often focus on the things that we break and the things that we mess up, and now the story of exploration is even in need of some public relation, because back in the days of even Armstrong or the great explorers, people were looking up to these new frontiers. Right now, we keep wondering why go to Antarctica, why go to the moon, why go beyond, because we've already messed up one place and the human species is a bad species and we need to fix things before we do anything else. Do you think that we've become too focused on the negativity of what we do and not enough about what we can do together when we come together?
I think so. Maybe, especially as a team, as a world together, I think we sometimes forget some of the great things we can accomplish. I think it's also human nature, though, to think about what's wrong, because that affects us typically a lot more than what's right. We tend to be, oh no, I got this and that, and this is bad, and look at all these terrible things. And I think it is, there's a lot of bad things going on. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's good to recognize those things, whether it's trying to keep the planet healthy or trying to reduce conflict in the world, which we have plenty of right now. And I don't think it's going to end. And I don't see why it would end anytime soon. Conflicts have been going on my entire life, and you always think that, well, maybe we're getting over it, but there's always something going on somewhere, and people are always causing trouble someplace. It seems like we're not always doing the right things, but I think we need to realize that that's going to be the case a lot of the time, but we also have the opportunity when we really pull together to do some extraordinary things. And I think the example of that is the Apollo program, pulling together to go to the moon, but also the other things we've done in space and in science and engineering. When we find that common ground and when we all have that mission in common, all of a sudden all of the differences go away. And I think that that's one of the great advantages that science and engineering projects and the space program has, is that, no matter whatever country you're from, if you have that goal of trying to solve a problem or make things, explore space, you realize that working together, you're going to be a lot better off than working by yourself. The other thing is, you mentioned a little bit about overview effect and so on. And for me, one thing that changed the way I think about our planet, there was a couple things, but one major shift for me happened on my second mission, going around the planet so many times, especially during the spacewalks. It was quite extraordinary. We were pretty high up there, and you could see the curve of the planet, and it's kind of cool. And after a while, I started thinking of what home, where I'm from, where and it changed for me. When I was a little kid, I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Franklin Square, and that street, which now bears my name, by the way. That street I grew up on was kind of my world. And if you asked me when I was a little kid, where are you from? I'd say Franklin Square. That's where I'm from, and that's where the library was, and all my schools, and my friends, and everybody. And then probably by the time I got to college, and I started meeting people from other parts of the country and the world, I identified myself as a New Yorker. And I'm from New York. And then as an astronaut, I think I made the leap, moving to Houston, Texas to train and be at the Johnson Space Center. I made the leap of I'm an American, because I'm representing my country and I'm an American. And I'll always be all those things. But after going to space and looking at the planet, it hit me on my second space flight. Probably was my last spacewalk, looking down at the planet and realizing that everything I have ever known, and anyone, as far as we know, who's ever lived, and anyone that's coming after us for at least probably a while, that's their home. It's this planet. Everything is there. And when I think of home now, I think of Earth. I'm all these. I'm an American. I'm a kid from New York. All that, but I think of our planet as home, and it's a place we all share. And I think that if we think of it that way, then all of a sudden all of our differences kind of fall away. We're all from the same place. We all share it. It's a home we all share.
You're the first New Yorker in space, officially.
No,
no,
it's funny. Yeah, New Yorker, no, there were a bunch. No, there was plenty. There was Bo Bobko was from Brooklyn. He was a shuttle pilot. There's a bunch: Jim Weatherby, Bill Shepard, Kevin Kriegel. I don't think the original guys, I don't think they had a New Yorker. I don't know who the first one was. Mario Runco was from the Bronx. So when I first started looking into being an astronaut, you could write to, now this is in the 1980s, right? So maybe around 1987. So I don't know if the internet was around then. I don't really think so. So I wrote a letter to NASA and said, hey, can you send me these astronaut biographies? And a couple of weeks, a big stack of paper came in an envelope, and I got to read all the current astronaut biographies. And I'm looking where these people are from. And then I came across Mario Runco, who was an Italian guy, an Italian-American, who was a cop for a while. He was a New York State trooper before he joined the Navy, and that led him to NASA. But he was from the Bronx, and his parents had very Italian names. I remember like Filomena and something else. His name was Mario, and so maybe there's hope here. But so he certainly was ahead of me. I think he was maybe the first Italian American. He wasn't the first. There was a guy named Carl Meade, who I think his name got mixed up along the generations. But he was also an Italian American. I think he might have been the first Italian American, and then Mario wasn't the first New Yorker. There was someone before him, I'm sure.
Now, circling back to having that realization that this is your home, we all come from the same place. But often one of the thought that I want to bring back to that idea is that being from the same home, like even you have children, you have a wife, being from the same place does not necessarily take away the fact that in that home there is conflict, there is tensions, there is you can, if I stepped out of our house right now, I can look back and I can see there's one building behind me, but within that building there's a bunch of divisions because obviously everybody wants to have their private place. There's a restroom, there's a kitchen. You don't want to cook into the bedrooms. So looking back at Earth, right, we all come from the same place, but on this planet Earth, there's a lot of geographical differences. There's a lot of upbringing, the way that we're brought up, philosophies, religions. Do you think that we need to consider the reality to come to the table and understanding that despite the fact that we come from the same place, we have different stories,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's what makes life interesting. We believe different things, a wide variety of things. I think a space crew is similar to a family. You know, you mentioned not everybody gets along all the time, even in families. You know, everyone has their differences. But I think it's important to be able to work together. But certainly, people have different, you know, there's different religions and different thoughts, and everyone has their own definition of what works for them or what they believe. And but I think that's good. I think if everyone, I was told once by Alan Bean, who painted this thing, by the way. This is a lithograph of one of his paintings. But Alan was one of the 12 who walked on the moon, but he was also an artist and a painter. He devoted his time to painting after he left NASA. But and I talk about it in my book too. He mentioned that in order to solve major problems, if everyone thinks the same way, you'll never solve anything. You need people who think differently, and that can sometimes lead to differences. But especially when you're working together on something, you have to find a way to care for and admire everyone on your team. And if you find someone that you don't like because they think differently or you just don't get along with them, don't think of it as you don't like them. Think of it as you don't know them well enough. And take the time to get to know them well so that you can find something about them that you care for and admire. I kind of took it a step further from that advice. Is like once you find that one thing that you really like about that person, whether it's your family member or whoever it might be, put that in your bank of good thoughts in your head. And when you get mad, especially when I think it's really important in your personal life if you can do this, try to remember something nice about that person. You know, try to go back to that bank of good thoughts and go lead with that before you deal with whatever conflict you're about to discuss. So, I think people are going to be different, and that's normal, and that's the only way we can solve major problems is by having diversity of thought and different people with different backgrounds, and sometimes that leads to conflict. But we have to understand that that's just part of it, and need to learn how to adjust and work through that.
I think it's it's part of that foundation of nature of life that more diversity makes it more resilient, but also more complex, and therefore you need to develop and teach the skills for people to develop that complexity as opposed to let them polarize each other into those. So in your book you have a series of advices, and one of them is the 30-second rules. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I learned it from my crewmate Megan MacArthur, who learned it from C.J. Sturcow, who's a Marine pilot, astronaut. And when I wrote the book, I checked what I remember with both of them. So I give them, they get an assist on this one, as I learned it from them. And the book is some things I came up with on my own, but a lot of things that I learned from others. And the 30-second rule is a way to deal with making mistakes. And one of the things I had to learn, and I spoke to some of my astronaut colleagues about this, that in fact there was a Woody Hoberg he was picked after I left NASA, and he visited New York City, and we did a couple events together at Columbia, and became very friendly as a result. He was a great guy, and he was asked the question, what did you have to learn, or what was the most important thing you learned? And he answered how to make mistakes. And I didn't have to learn, how to deal with your mistakes, because people naturally make mistakes. And I used to sometimes ruminate over a bad decision or what I thought was a mistake for days or a week, and just be kind of in the dumps. And it doesn't work like that in space, because you're still going to make mistakes, but it doesn't work well when you ruminate on it. You're not in the game. You're not fully participating in trying to find a solution, and it could lead to more trouble. And so you have to figure out a way to get over it. And I hear that a lot, like in sports, leave it behind, let it pass, don't think about it, have a short memory and all that. But I never really worked, like, okay, I'll forget about it. And like, nah, I didn't forget about it yet. And I think what it is for the 30-second rule, it gives you a chance to be mad at yourself and be upset. So 30 seconds of regret. I think C.J. Sturcow called it 30 seconds of remorse. When, man, I really messed up. For me, it was more just like kind of beating yourself up and, I can't believe I did this. This is the worst mistake ever. Neil Armstrong will never speak to me again. I'm the worst astronaut in the history of astronauts. whatever it is that you've done, just beat yourself up as bad as, but don't vocalize anything because you'll scare people. Just keep it to yourself internally. But after that 30-second rant, finish off with, that's that. It's done. I'll never let that happen again. And now it's time to try to look for a way to come back. But this mistake is in the past. Don't think about it anymore, and let's work toward a solution. And I found that to be very effective because it allows you to be mad at yourself and recognize that you messed up, but it doesn't ruin the entire mission or day or hour or whatever it is. You're out of there in 30 seconds.
Now, you're a teacher at Columbia University. You have a front row seat to this younger generation that's growing up, trying to make their career. Are the people now with mistakes, right? That rule of the 30 seconds of accepting to make mistakes, is that something that they struggle with, or is it something that they embrace more, or what's their relationship with failure and mistakes?
No, I think they struggle with it for sure. I think the world has become more competitive, and the students that I have in my class and in our school are pretty good students and very competitive from the standpoint that they're used to achieving highly, and it doesn't always work out that way. And I think that when they make a mistake or they mess up, they tend to get disappointed in themselves. And so that's one of the things I try to share with them is that you're going to make those mistakes. It's okay to be mad. You don't want to make mistakes. Don't try to do it. It's going to happen enough. But I certainly do think that this is characteristics. I think of everybody. I don't think it's just the young people. I think everyone. But I do think, though, I think younger people have it tougher than what I had. Maybe I think there's just more out there with the internet, and when you make a mistake or you do something stupid, it's just amplified because a lot of people are going to find out about it. Maybe a lot of people have phones and are recording things and sharing things, and it's not a fun way to go through life, I think, in a lot of ways when you make a mistake. So, but certainly, I think it certainly is something that is on their mind and something we all can improve on.
Unfortunately, the path to an innovation is exactly the same path to a mistake. The only difference is the hindsight, right? One worked, one didn't work. And you cannot, even from an engineer perspective, but also from a personal perspective, you will never not make mistakes. That is one of the only taxes and death and mistakes are, they're the things that are going to happen to you. Which brings me also to another rule in your book, or one of the big lessons that you teach, is when to pivot. And when to pivot is always complicated because you never know. Sometimes you never know when you've given enough, and sometimes the success will happen because you've keep persevering, through all the rejection and all this. And sometimes you have to learn to kind of let it go. So how do you proceed to explain when to pivot, and what's your general teachings there?
I think, and just to maybe add a little bit onto what we talked about, you can be upset with yourself with a mistake and move on, and then after you can figure out what really went wrong. It's always like, an investigation of why did that happen? Why did this happen? So I think it's okay to learn from your mistakes, but in the moment, usually you have to let them pass, and then we can talk about it after in the debrief. And as far as the pivoting goes, there's sometimes it's, I think just a lot of times just like listening to yourself, maybe, of what you're really telling yourself. What are your actions saying to you? When I like this, I don't like this. As far as like giving up on a dream, I think that's a really tough one to do. I don't think that you should take that one so lightly if that's what you're contemplating. If it's a life stream and it really is that important to you, I think whatever that is, you have to be honest with yourself and say, this is really important to me. And that was something I had to deal with, trying to become an astronaut, is that it really was important to me. And I could lie and say, oh, it's really not that important. But it really was important to me. And and I knew it was not very likely that I was going to work out, but the only thing I could control was trying. And there's also a chapter in a book called One Out of a Million is Not Zero, which is the first chapter. It's about perseverance. As long as you're trying, there's a chance for you to be successful. So in that case, a life stream, I'm pretty certain I wouldn't have given up. I would have continued on that. And not even if I never became an astronaut, I felt like I had gotten to a point where I had, when I interviewed my second time, it was my fourth astronaut class I was trying to get into. And I remember thinking, if I get rejected again, which more likely was going to be the outcome, I was in a good place. I was teaching at Georgia Tech. My family was doing well, and I had 2 kids, and life was good. You know, I had gotten my private pilot's license, and I learned how to scuba dive, and I had got my PhD, and I was doing space-related research, and I had all these friends in the space program, and I was contributing. And so that was a good place to be. So I think when you're pursuing a dream, even if it doesn't work out, to me, success is just trying and not giving up. And then when it's time to like move on, like for me, a big decision was to move on from NASA. And I really don't think I moved on from the space program. I still feel very much a part of it. I teach now, as you mentioned, at a university at Columbia, and my students are great, and we have a really active group who are interested in the space program. We have a very active space club, over 400 students in our space club, and they're all pretty active, doing many different missions and projects and doing all kinds of great things. So I still feel like I'm part of the space program, even though I'm not an astronaut any longer. And I think for me, it came down to just a feeling like I had enough. I didn't believe that would ever happen. And it's been 10 years, almost 10 years now that I left. But there was a point where I thought, I'll never leave. This is the greatest job in the world. But it came a point where I felt like I felt satisfied in what I had accomplished. And there were other things I was interested in doing that wasn't going to work as an astronaut. I needed to kind of give that up to pursue some other things that was still with the space program, but just a different role is the way I looked at it. And I think knowing when to pivot is just being honest with yourself. And what are you really interested in? How do you spend your time? If all of a sudden, when I first started, I used to love doing simulations. It didn't matter what hour of the night I was being called in to train or to do something at NASA. I wasn't that interested after a while. When I got after 15 years, I was like, I don't know about that midnight sim anymore. So I think I just started telling myself. And I remember Jerry Ross telling me that he was still with NASA, and he started in 1980 and left, I think, when the shuttle program finished up in 2011, a little bit before I left. But he was there like 30 years as an astronaut. And I remember him telling me, he was still there, and he kept saying, what he told me one time was that he could always tell when one of his classmates was going to leave, is that they started complaining. Like, oh man, I got this and that. They were just interested in doing other things. And I think that's okay. It's not that it's better or worse, but it's okay. And to admit that to yourself and realize that, life has many phases. I got a lot of advice, again, from the guy who painted this, Alan Bean. And some people pivot and leave and things and do well, and some don't. So it doesn't always work out well. And I think you have to really think hard about it and make sure you're doing something for the right reasons. Never feel entitled to anything. I don't know if this is where you were going with the question, but some of the advice that I got was really good. I got that from Alan Bean and from Jim Lovell, told me the same story more or less, was that never feel entitled to anything. Some people, I've accomplished this, I've done this, now it's time to cash in. No. That's, you did that. You do things because you want to do them, because they're the right thing to do, and don't expect anything. Don't expect any that you're entitled to a thing. And so that's why I looked at it, the pivoting for a career. Sometimes a decision isn't working out, where if you're trying to do trying to figure out an engineering problem and it's just not working, or you're trying to plan something and it's just too hard, then maybe it's time for a different approach, and to pivot, to do something differently. And I think an example of this was NASA with replacing the space shuttle. They pivoted to a new model, which was a commercial crew program to open up space, the economic development in space, which is what they wanted to do with the shuttle. And it didn't work out that way, but then he had an opportunity to do that, to pivot when the shuttle ended to more commercial programs. So I think it can be in your own personal life, trying to make a career decision, or should you move or try something differently. Leaving the astronaut office was major. That was a major decision of when to leave NASA. And sometimes it's about a problem you're working on. Sometimes it's about a program. But I think you've got to be honest with yourself and kind of just really what's important to you. Like, what is really important here to me? And look at your actions, because your actions will tell you what you're interested in and where you're spending your time and where you're willing to make sacrifices. And maybe you're not willing to make sacrifices in certain areas anymore, and it's time to move on. That's the way it was for me.
Like, it's where your heart is. And so for that, and for a lot of people, it's different. But as long as your heart wants to be there, then continue. If it doesn't, then, reassess. Same thing, even in a relationship, like, you got to ask these, like, why are you there? Do you still respect the other person? If you don't respect the other person, then that's a bigger issue. You were saying about, like, never take things for granted. And one of the things that for me has always been super important, like, there's one word that irks me, is deserve, right? I deserve something.
Yeah.
And no one deserve anything,
I'm kinda with you.
because
No.
there are people who will work their entire life, day in, day out. They would deserve something, and then they will move on to another chapter in their lives, never receiving the type of recognition. And then you have others, they do work hard, but, like, no one deserve to get something. You're one of the ways that I like to phrase it is that you're worthy of receiving. Obviously, you've put the hours, but deserving is it demands for society, as opposed to you're worthy of receiving. It makes it about society, or the outside environment to give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I agree. Yeah, I got a kid. Yeah, people deserve things. No, you don't.
No. No. Mike, you're a man of you've written 2 books, best-selling. You give a lot of talks. You're a teacher. You have your hands really close to what it is to be human, and to be successful, for whatever that definition of successful is. What would be Mike's 3 words of wisdom?
Mike's 3 words. Okay, you might get a different answer 5 minutes from now. But right now, I think the 3 words that I think of are persistence, teamwork, and kindness. Not necessarily in that order. Things.
You say that they might be different.
I might throw something else in there
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Would they be within kind of the same realm, or really different?
No, definitely in the same realm. I think that persistence is really important, in that successful people that I've found are not those who never failed. Those are those who never let failure stop them. And I think you have to have that. You have to persist through failure and disappointment and whatever life throws at you, which most of which is not your fault. So I think that certainly is one thing that's important in life, and not just in your professional life, but also in your personal life, because personal lives are usually quite tougher than what we deal with professionally. So I think that not giving up and not letting anything stand in your way of doing whatever it is that you're trying to do, you just understand it's going to be tough. You're going to get knocked down. There's going to be failures, challenges, disappointments, delays. So I think that's really important. The second one I said was teamwork, right? So for me, it's to remember that we're not alone in this, and that there's help, and that we tend to, I think, be okay with giving help generally. What I've noticed people are, and I feel that way too. But we aren't always ready to ask for help. And you should look at it as that we're all trying to succeed here. And if you need help and you don't speak up, you're kind of making things worse for others too. And that it's okay to ask for help, and to have relationships where you can trust each other and rely on each other, and have people that you can reach out to, and also be that person that people can come to. And it makes for a wonderful way to go through life. And that's a chapter in the book I talk about is on teamwork and how I learned it as a new astronaut when I was having trouble with my swim qualification and got help. And the story was is that the question was asked to our group, who are the strong swimmers and who are the weak swimmers, as we were getting ready for a swim test in order to go to water survival training right at the beginning of our training. And we had some strong swimmers raise their hands, and I raised my hand as a weak swimmer, and everyone else was excused for the weekend because the test was coming on Monday. And Jeff Ashby, our class leader from a previous astronaut class, said, okay, everyone else who didn't raise their hand can go, but the strong swimmers and the weak swimmers are going to stay after class. You're going to arrange a time to meet at a pool on Saturday or over the weekend. Strong swimmers are going to help the weak swimmers because when we go to the pool on Monday, no one leaves the pool until everyone passes the test. And for me, that was a really good lesson learned in teamwork, is that, if you need help, you ask for it. And it wasn't a burden for the strong to help the weak, because the team is what matters. And I think that's who you want to be around. You want to be around people that will accept your help when they need it and will help you when you need it. And there's not going to be any pointing fingers, but you're going to stick together on this deal. And then kindness, I think we should try to remember that as much as we can. That I've found that the successful people I've been around, most of them are extremely kind people to as much as they can to their families and to each other and to their friends and just to people in general. I tend to forget that sometimes, I run around getting, I got to get here, I got to get there. But I do think that it's really important. And there's a line, there's a line in a movie called, I don't know why I'm quoting this, but my friend Chaz Palminteri, who's an actor, wrote and starred in this movie, The Bronx Tale, which is basically a story of his life. And there's a line in there, and he told me the backstory to it once because we're friends. But there's a line in there where he says to someone, never confuse kindness for weakness. And I was telling that to a student a few years ago, and she said, you know what else? You should never confuse meanness for strength. And I think that being kind is important, and I think it goes a long way in being persistent and also in teamwork. If we can be kind to each other. So I think we tend to forget that. I think sometimes in the world we live in, but I think kindness is a very admirable quality, and I think we should look for that in our partners and in our friends. Are they kind, and are you being kind? Because I think that's really something to strive for.
It's often the same thing with leadership, right? Leadership you don't have to be an asshole to be a leader.
No,
in fact, and
I
see it often. No,
yeah,
like I sit with, even with dogs, right? The dogs are pack animals.
Yeah.
They're looking for that pack leader.
Yeah.
But some people will act with dogs in the mean way, thinking
Yeah.
that, this is, but the dogs don't respect you in that matter. They are looking for that leader, but they're looking for strength of character, not for meanness. One of the things that often I've used as a metaphor for, and then we'll end on that, and then I'll wrap up after. For me, the body, like you are an engineer, and obviously you understand how nothing exists in a vacuum by itself. Every element is connected to other things, and then you have an entire ecosystem. The body for me has always been, obviously a great example of that. There's nothing in your body that can work just by itself, whether the brain, the heart, or the lungs. And even the lungs, right, by themselves achieve absolutely nothing. They're just a lump of flesh that just would just lay on the table. It's the diaphragm and the rib cage muscles and its tension that constantly expands them and contracts and makes them allow. But also one of the biggest lessons is that you have to make yourself vulnerable for them to work, because you have to take the world in, and you don't know what comes in, right? It's not like taste, where your body has developed a sense of, you can decide, this is good for me, this is not good. Smelling is literally, you have to kind of let the world come in and then you have this reciprocity. Whatever I take from the world around me is given back, and there's this constant relationship. But yeah, that's just the thought that ran through my mind with the
Everything
teamwork.
works together. Yeah.
It does. Mike, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Daniel. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
We will make sure the links to your books are down in the descriptions, and then we'll make a link to all your website and different places where people can find you. Where are you going next?
First of all, that's very kind. Thank you, Daniel. Where am I going next? Let's see. I'm getting on an airplane today to go give a talk in Chicago at a pharmaceutical company, and then I go to Grand Rapids, Michigan, to talk at I think it's the Western Michigan Aviation program, where it's a really great educational program where students learn how to fly and so on. So that's this week, and then a bunch of travel, lots of speaking, other things going on. Hopefully a little vacation.
We'll expect you to become another a regular on another TV show, TV sitcom now.
Oh, I don't know. What have I got coming up? I was in a movie. I haven't seen this movie. I was in a movie. We filmed it like a year and a half ago, my little piece, but it's called Space Cadet. It's kind of based on like the Legally Blonde movies, where, someone kind of ends up in a place that might be sort of unusual to have that person there. And it's about someone who is not necessarily what you consider to be your typical astronaut. Emma Roberts is the star, and there's a bunch of other really cool people in it, other big stars. But I have a bit role. I just play myself, Daniel. I keep playing myself. I was a voice, and this is a good one. This is about a year ago, though. I was a voice in Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. Have you know who Beavis and Butthead are, Daniel? There. So Mike Judge, the creator, and I are friends, and whenever I guess I'm his go-to space guy from time to time, but he's a very funny guy, of course. And so I'm a voice in that, so you can catch me there. But yeah, no, I don't think any more sitcoms, little appearances here and there. When they call me, we were talking earlier, I'll go places if I'm invited. I usually don't push myself in. I got enough going on. But I don't necessarily pursue these things. But every once in a while I'll get a call to do something. So a couple things going on that way. But probably not like a recurring role in the Big Bang Theory, which is what you're referring to. I don't know if that's going to happen again. We'll see.
Mike, continue to do the amazing work. Looking forward for next time together. And I will. I don't know if you saw it, but Beavis and Butthead, Ryan Gosling recently on the Saturday Night Live was hilarious. I will send you the link.
I didn't see it. I'll look for that. I'm glad to see him in good company.
Excellent. Mike, thank you so very much. We'll see you soon.
Daniel, thanks so much. I appreciate it.